Well, there you have it, guys. Another episode of the Coaches Network podcast, where our aim is to bring the world of athlete, talent, and personal development together to just one platform. And you can help us with that mission right now by sharing this episode or any of your favorite episodes with everyone that you can think of. You can tag us in those mentions as well on Instagram at the Coaches Network or on Twitter at the Coaches Net. We look forward to hearing from you. Let us know what you thought about today's episode. And until next time, guys, take care. Right, guys, welcome back to the Coaches Network. My name's Coach Yas, and I've got a very special guest with me today. A great guest, a great mentor of mine as well, Noel Blake. Morning, Noel. How are you doing, man?
Morning, Yas. I'm good, pal. Good to see you.
Likewise, I'm very well. I'm really pleased and really excited for this conversation, Noel. But I'm conscious there's going to be people that do know you, people that don't. So maybe just give us a brief rundown of who you are, what you do, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, Noel Blake, former footballer. I had a sort of people may say, a long career. Started at Aston Villa, mid to late 70s, an apprentice. Then went on from there. In fact, I was at a local non-league club called Sutton Coldfield Town in Birmingham, and then went from there to Villa. From Villa, I did my apprenticeship with Villa. Really good club for developing the young players. Some good top pros, managers first class all the way through. I was fortunate to be at the club when they've won the what is now the Premier League, the first division, and also they went on to win the European Cup, which is now the Champions League, following year. So I was in and around the club, in and around it. Then I moved to Birmingham City after the manager left. Ron Saunders left to go to Birmingham. But in between that, I had a sort of a long spell at Shrewsbury Town, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And that was really sort of, I came back in my thinking that I was ready for first team football. And then when the chance came to go to Birmingham, then obviously I went. And being a Birmingham fan, that sort of, I was really pleased with that in terms of getting on to get first team football at that stage. But because going back briefly to Villa, I was part of a very good youth setup. I won the FA Youth Cup, Youth Cup final, Southern Junior Floodlit Cup as it was back in the day. Number of players went on to play in the first team at Villa and had long careers in the Football League, various different clubs. From there, from Birmingham, I went down to Portsmouth. I had 4 years, 4 very good years down at Portsmouth. After Portsmouth, I moved on to Leeds United. Again, some challenging times, but enjoyable times. All the clubs I've been to have been challenging for different reasons. But Leeds was a really good experience, both on and off the field. A lot of ways which we'll come on to touch on a bit later on. And then from Leeds, I came to Stoke City. And to City, one of the reasons I still live in the area now. I've been here 30 odd years since I moved from Leeds and just commuted. After I left Stoke, went to Bradford City, we commuted. Bradford City, then on to Dundee up in Scotland for a couple of years. And then from there to Exeter City, where I became a player assistant manager. And then from there became the manager. I did 7.5 years altogether at Exeter. And after Exeter, I then moved on. Exeter, then it was on to, I had a brief spell at Notts County as a first team coach. Quick change of management. Then I went to coach at Stoke City Academy, 13-14s, and various groups over a period of time. I left that for a while because I was then appointed, as I said to you yesterday in the room, I was appointed as one of the assistant managers at Barnsley from Gudjon Thordarson, Icelandic manager, who I'd only met briefly on a couple of occasions. But as I said, I didn't realise he was watching the sessions from afar, and then he came in and asked me to come and be one of his assistants. And I thoroughly enjoyed working with Gudjon, and we still remain good friends to this day. After that, went back to Stoke, after our contracts were terminated. Again, the usual one, new regime coming in, they want to make all these fancy changes and whatnot. And the year before, they'd finished 1 point off relegation, and we left them 1 point just outside the playoffs. And the new regime, new owners, and that's the industry we're in, and away we went. But I went back to Stoke City, where I became academy manager, and also the 18s coach, under 18s coach, and that. I did 4 years with that, and then the knock came for the third time to go join the FA as a development coach, and yeah, so I went on from there. And then after that, did seven and a half years at the FA. We had a lot of talented young boys, a lot of good coaches, a lot of good people in the organisation, coach education as well, one of my remits. Worked on the pro license, B license, A license, etc. And then from there, again, new regime, things changed. I moved on, amongst others. You know, one of the change over the guard, so to speak. Moved on. Went to Blackpool, again as an assistant coach. Didn't work out the way it had planned. A lot of promises were made, but also it's false. Let's put it that way. It was false. A lot of trials and tribulations on and off the field in terms of not having the players and facilities and so on and so forth. And we had to go through a tough time, but again, it was challenging. And then again, new managers come in, usual promises, don't want you to leave, want you to stay, you know, this, that, other, and whatever. But I had another job to go to back in Coach Ed. And false promises. And then eventually, as I always remember what he said to me, in the manager, I want to bring my best mate in. So all of a sudden, where I had a job to go to 2 weeks before when the previous manager left, all of a sudden now I'm surplus to requirements, and so eventually I became an agent. I worked on for my own consultancy. I'm now at the moment I'm doing a lot of mentoring for various different organisations and individuals as well. But I was running a football agency as well, with part of the consultancy, but I've decided to leave that alone about 6 weeks ago, more for my own sort of sanity more than anything else, and that sort of thing. So that's a little sort of a snapshot of where I've been.
Indeed, you know, obviously you've managed to kind of put together maybe 30, 40 years for us in a matter of minutes. But let's start with that. You know, right at the top of that, you know, you mentioned that you came through as a young player at Aston Villa. Obviously, a very big period at the club at the time in terms of them winning the European Cup at the time. You mentioned that obviously it's a club that was really good in terms of youth development. Now we're going back almost 30, 40 years on that one. Where we are today, there is some clubs that have got a historic tradition of, you know, developing youth players. What was it? What were the major things that was happening back then that you think are still consistent now, and how dramatically do you think things have changed now in terms of what that looks like?
The landscape has changed drastically, but going back to my sort of time at Villa, in terms of the youth development, there was the manager Ron Saunders, his assistant Roy McLaren, and Tony Barton, who was his assistant manager, but he's also his chief scout. Then you had, in my time, they brought another coach in George Armstrong, the rest of his soul, who used to be at Arsenal and played for Arsenal, double winning team, the right wing, and George came for a bit. And then we had a youth team coach, who was a former player, Keith Leonard. He was a youth team coach when I joined. And we all trained at the same venue, you know, one of the original training grounds, Bodymore Heath. They're still there now, but expanded, you know, drastically. But my coach, I know I'm a youth team coach, Keith Leonard. The big influence on me at the time was my reserve team coach, a fellow called Bill Shorthouse, God rest his soul. Bill, for those of you who know football back in the sort of 50s sort of thing, the great Wolves team of that era, we played alongside Billy Wright, who was the former England captain. And Bill was a centre-back. And, I was obviously a centre-back and that sort of thing. And then he did a lot of work with myself, people like Brendan Ormsby, who went on to play a lot of games for captain Leeds, played for Villa, in the lower leagues. Well, a really top centre-half, young centre-half. He's a year older than me, Brendan. We came through together. But Bill worked on us individually, not just to set the defenders, but the whole group. And little nuggets of information he'd pass on, obviously being an ex-defender, was terrific, and stood me in good stead throughout my career. But one of the big things that club taught you was life skills. The holistic development of a young player was imperative for them, and all the way through. Also, a lot of lads went on to play in Villa's first team. Like Ray Walker, Dean Glover, Mark Walters, who went on to play for Liverpool and England as well, Wally. Gary Shaw, Gordon Cowans, Colin Gibson, the list is endless, Gary Williams. In fact, when Villa won the European Cup, I think there was, top of my head, I think there's about 7 other lads who came through the youth programme at Villa over the years to being part of that squad when they won it. But there was a lot of individual work done on the syllabus. Yeah. And if you were fortunate enough to break through from the youth team into the proper reserve team, as it was then back in the day, and you hold your place down, you stayed in the reserves. And then your next thing was a challenge for the first team. Because those days, what it used to be, if you are not in the reserve, if you're not in the first team, then you would play in the reserves, no matter how old you were. So I was playing with some really top players in the reserves at 17, so that enhanced my development. And that's one thing I would say at this moment in time where I personally would love to see the development leagues allow for 1 or 2 senior players to take part with the kids, the younger ones, to help them, to bring them on. It's almost like they were our coaches on the pitch. We were there. We gave them the legs, and but they wanted to get back into the first team, so they performed. And they would make sure you knew what the roles and responsibilities, and do the right thing. And if you weren't doing, you were told, and they helped you to enhance. And it was a way throughout the club. I'll give you a good example of how the club was. As we came out of our changing rooms onto the building to go to the pitches, here was the gymnasium, the old multi-gym with everything in there. You'd see no matter who the pro was, whether it was a Jimmy Rimmer, the senior goalkeeper, or Dennis Mortimer, the captain, or Andy Gray, or Peter With, or the man that people would be in that gym. So the culture was no one walked past the gym. So whether you're a first team player, if it always going every day, but there was always somebody in there working, or a group of people in there working, individual, not necessarily as a set routine of work. Because obviously when we did our gym sessions as players, the coaches took that, then that was different. But individually, you couldn't walk past it, because the culture tells you this is the environment and this is what it's about. And we had this thing where the younger lads, we had the thing where we used to do what they call a 4x2, 4x2 as we refer to it as. And basically what it meant was every day we did 400 sit-ups and 200 press-ups, 4x2. And it became just a renowned thing. If you didn't do nothing else, you did your 4x2. You just kept your body ticking over, really, as well as all the work you did in the grass. We would get our spikes on, for sprinting and sprints, and so on and so forth.
How the world has changed from that perspective.
Yeah.
I think it's quite interesting, because obviously, you talk there about, the environment and, some of the challenges that come with, obviously, you're alluding to in some ways some of the challenges that maybe some of the young players have today, where they don't really get to maybe mix with older players as often, get that experience that's been lent to them. But we're also seeing a few clubs now in more recent times that have kind of, especially with their under 21 sides, are recruiting maybe ex-players or players at the back end of their careers who are looking to go into coaching and being part of their setup, both at, almost as player coaches. I think the most recent one of note is probably Man United with Tom Huddleston. Doing something similar, kind of really ready to phase out, at the end of his career in terms of being a player, but looking to transition into coaching and really, do exactly what you've just said, really try to become almost that on-field coach for the players and lend that experience. But I think there's been so many changes. It loosely, you had your own kind of S&C program as well there, the 4x2 and the spikes for the sprinting. So, it's interesting to see what was kind of being done back then, and it kind of leads me on to a question I've been having a debate about over the last few weeks, and it's that, do you feel that there's anything really different generally that's actually taking place in terms of youth development and what that looks like? Do you think there's a right way to kind of develop players? And what would your thoughts be to the point that there's a lot of coaches out there who attach themselves to certain players, but actually the reality is there's some players that would have been good enough regardless of the coach was there or not?
Yeah, I mean, whatever level you work at, or coaching, there will always be players who are not going to be good enough in any industry. In any industry, it's like in a school setting. You have the same people in set 1 or set 2 for English, maths, etc. Some will achieve, some won't achieve. Some will achieve more than others, and others will achieve less. That's just the nature of life. But my thoughts on it, in terms of developing players, is look at the player, look at what he or she has got, work on strengths, and work on areas of concern. I've never really used the word in football terminology of weaknesses. I like to say areas of concern, because when you're talking to a young person, the minute you start to use the phraseology weakness, how are they receiving that message? Yeah, how are they taking that on board? And once they start taking on board, oh, he said that I'm weak at this, or I'm not, basically to them, you're not good at that. And then that becomes an issue. They're often, in my previous life within England, in development groups, we would go into clubs, and sometimes we would what we call a club visit, and coaches would ask you to come in and talk about the players and what have you. And then, well, he can't do this, he can't do this, he can't do this. He's not going to be good enough because he can't do this. And I would just sit and listen. And then I would leave them with this one. Why did he bring him in the first place? And the reason why I asked that question is, he must have been able to do something good that you saw in him while you brought him in. Why don't you focus on what he's good at? It's like, I've heard the argument about Maradona, the great Diego Maradona, that he only had a left foot. Wow, what a left foot. Does he need a right foot if he's got a left foot like that? So it's a little bit of the old expression, he said, she said, she said, he said. But I all focus on people's strengths, and you do work on areas of concern. I wasn't a particularly good passer of the football, but those days my job was to be a defender, win it, edit. And as Alan Ball, God rest his soul, England World Cup winning midfield player, said to me and people around us, win it and give it to those who can play. So my job wasn't about being this and being that. When I was at Portsmouth, I had a centre half alongside me, a lad called Billy Gilbert, and he was a top player. Played for Crystal Palace, and that's, if you look back in history, that's sort of refers to Terry Venables' team of the 80s. He was one of the centre backs in there. And Gilbert he was a talented boy. For me, he should have played for the full national team, played for the 21s and what have you, but he's technically so gifted. He's a Rio Ferdinand type. Billy was that good at times. He'd go into training with no laces in his boots. He was that good, but a terrific, but competitive, and a terrific defender. So I just I won it, and I gave it to him, playing alongside me. The least touches I had, the better. My touches was clearances. My touches was actually winning the thing, because that's where I was brought up to play to my strengths. As I got older, obviously I got better, and if I could give it to the fullback or give it to the midfield player or what have you, and the diag. But that was it. My stock ball from back to front was, if the ball's played back to me, I could side foot it 20, 30 yards down the side of the pitch to get the strikers moving or into the striker. Yeah. So it's those little things that I would say. So you're working on people's strengths all the time. At times I do see I'm going a little bit to and fro and deliberately for a reason. At times I do see where there's an overemphasis on everything has got to be precise, but the game is not precise. The game is not, the game is not everybody, or not every coach. I'm going to use an expression here deliberately. Not every coach is Pep Guardiola, but every coach, and I think more in development coaches than senior coaches, they all think that Pep Guardiola. They all talk Pep Guardiola. They all do Pep Guardiola. But what's the reality of the game? You take a Liverpool team, they'll play more longer passes. Not the word I use there. Passes, not longer balls, longer passes. When it's on, Trent, it's that terrific diagonal. It's a long pass. It's a good pass. In my time as a footballer in the first division and playing against him in cup ties, Glenn Hoddle, the old ex-England manager, what a range of passing he had, left foot or right foot. So people would actually say to him, "Don't play that pass now." If he was developing, because he never got, he wouldn't get the opportunity to play. Everything was 5-10 yards, 5-10 yards in the development games. In the main, that's what I see.
I think it's a great point, because I think that's definitely one of the things I've noticed, in that regardless of what level they're playing at, regardless of regardless of what level the first team's playing at, I think we've seen almost a transition period now over the last especially the last 7, 8, maybe 10 years since the E-Triple-P's come in. But pretty much every academy tries to develop players in the same way, on a general scale, in my opinion. They all want their teams to be playing out from the back and technically proficient, but then how much support is that really giving the players if they're not all going to be playing in that type of environment at the highest level of the game? Are they doing enough to maybe prepare players at the lower levels of the game, where most of them are probably going to end up, whether rightly or wrongly? It just makes you think, like, ultimately what you've just said there about Liverpool, the game is there to be won based on the number of goals you score, not how many passes you can make in the build up to that. And it is about penetration, whether we like it or not. Yes, there's different ways in which we can kind of manipulate the way we play in order to support ourselves to being able to penetrate. But actually, bottom line is this: whether you're Man City, whether you're Chesterfield, or whoever you are, if that ball's on to go in behind and your striker is running onto it, that's the ball you're going to play, and that's the best ball, right? How do we move coaches away from that idea that it's not about the principles, when, in my opinion, that's what it's all about?
Well, in many respects, it's about the principles of the game, but it's coaches understand what are the principles of the game. Yeah. So if it's on to play early, why not play early? And if it's not on to play, then you got to think about retaining. So that's when you start to keep the possession based, and as the Dutch expression they'll use, start to probe. And why you're probing, waiting for the opening, to be able to play forward and recognize when you can play forward. So once you recognize when you can play forward, what do? You don't turn back and then go short and square again. Then you play forward, because you've earned the right to play forward. Because the opening, and I like in football to drive in a car, and the motorway is a good analogy I've always used. When you're on the motorway and it's blocked, and they say take the diversion down the A roads, you get to your destination. Are you going to sit in the traffic, or are you going to do your diversion to get where you want to get to? So you've got the option. Yeah. So football is like that to me. If it's on, you can go. If it's not on, change the direction.
100%. And I think for me, I've always encouraged coaches, especially from a coach development capacity, is that no matter what, you can play whatever way you want to play, but rather than look at it as we're trying to maintain possession, we're trying to attack in the wide areas, or we're trying to penetrate out, through the midfield third or whatever. I think probably the best way to frame it is on the back end of it, always attach in order to penetrate.
Yeah.
Because if that remains your focus, then everything you do is, like you said, it's a probe to get to a point where you can now penetrate, because that's what the game's about. And without that in order to penetrate piece, I'd liken it almost to maybe what we saw under Louis van Gaal with Man United.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost just about retention of possession and not so much focus on actually trying to penetrate.
That's a cultural thing to a degree. If you ever watch a Dutch setup overall,
Yeah.
But interestingly, if you take the World Cup, there was I forget what game it was. They needed a goal, the Dutch, and what did they do? They brought two big strikers on.
Yeah.
So now they're going to change the emphasis rather than playing probing. They're going to bit more mix the. No, I wouldn't say direct. I use an expression: mix the game styles. Yeah. So when to play short and when to play long. So in other words, it's effective football. Now there was a comment after the game the other day when Scotland won the game against Spain, and the Spanish captain Ruben Diaz came out and said Scotland played long ball game. Now, I used to experience that all the time with England national teams, because whenever the so-called the Dutch and the Germans, or not so much the French, the Dutch and the Germans, especially the Dutch in particular, when they lost the game, and the Spanish, when they lost the game to anybody, that expression always came out. The Portuguese were another one. That expression always came out. Oh, they played a long ball game. Oh, they did this. They're too physical. They were physical. They were this. The minute they win the game, they were this, and they were played beautiful game. And I just used to go, because it's and answer to your question, that's where coaches get roped in rather than doing what's right and knowing the right things to do. There's more than one way to play the game.
Yeah, but there's only one way to win it.
One way to win it is score more goals than the opposition.
And that's it. And it can only be done through penetration. So, I get the concept of playing in different ways, but there's got to be a stronger reason than this is how I want to play.
Yeah, because I played for a manager at Leeds, Howard Wilkinson, and people used to lambast him about he played a direct style of play, especially when the Sheffield Wednesday they did this and then that. Howard had a team at Notts County in the sort of early 80s in the old first division when I was playing. And at that time, there was 13 teams from the Midlands in the first division. 13 teams. You take the East Midlands team, the Derby, the Leicesters, Nottingham Forest, the European champions twice. Then you had the West Midlands, where I played with Birmingham, Villa, and Coventry and Wolves, all in the first division. Notts County was also in from the East Midlands in there. So all together, there were about 13 teams in and around it. But he played with a conventional sweeper. Again, going back in the day, what they'd call like a Franz Beckenbauer, a Rudy Kroll, or a current, what's his name, Ronnie Koeman, that type. A lad called Pedro Richards, God rest his soul. Yeah, only 5'10", 5'11", playing alongside a big centre half. But they fullbacks pushed on in the 4-4-2, 4-4-1-1, but played through the thirds. Liverpool played through the thirds back in those days, and they're saying it's a modern trend. It's not a modern trend. There's more emphasis on it. There's more emphasis on it, and it's a bit like.
Is there more emphasis on it because more people are trying to do it, or because there is more emphasis on it? Because I feel like one of the, obviously I've not been around as long as yourself, but seeing what I've seen over the last kind of 15 years that I've been involved, coaches seem to be getting younger and younger and younger, and maybe they're more easily influenced by the likes of a Guardiola, by the likes of a whoever else it is that's playing whatever style of play. So it's probably, like you said earlier, that I want to be like Pep. Well, okay, you can be like Pep, but actually Pep's got he's put a massive budget to play the way he wants to play and get the players in to play the way he wants to play. So the reality is, are you going to be like Pep, or can you just take some inspiration from the way he plays and the reasons why? Because even coming back to the point that we're making around the principles of play and penetration itself, if it's on to go long, Pep's doing it. He's encouraging his players to do it.
I was gonna actually touch on about. I've seen them a few times this year with Erling Haaland. They play a little bit more. That's why I use the expression "mix the game styles."
Yeah,
because it's not one cap fits all in any game. Yeah, so they'll cross earlier sometimes now. They'll play down the sides early at times, but the principle of play is still there. Yeah. Now they did that last season as well, and times in times gone by. So they played what was on when it was on.
100%. I think the best example of that, I think it was about, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, where they were in the Carling Cup final against Arsenal.
Yeah.
But Arsenal did really well in that the first half, kind of really pressed them high, didn't really allow them to play out from the back. So Man City basically said, all right, if you're not going to let us play out from the back, bang, one ball up top, Aguero's through and he scores. Now all of a sudden I have to drop off again. We're back to plan A. So it's not something that's just been, changed over the last couple of years. And ultimately, I think it's recognizing that, especially on the Guardiola style, his style really is to get his teams to maintain possession, as you said, probe the opposition maybe into pressing the ball, creating little gaps in between and exploiting those gaps really well through clever movement.
Right. If you think back about Guardiola, what's Guardiola's influence? His influence is Johan Cruyff.
100%.
What's Johan Cruyff's influence? Dutch, from his coach back in the 60s and 70s. So it's a continuation. Now, the way I look at football is this. Wherever the space is, if I can outnumber you in no space, I'm going to take it. Now, I always liken football to a degree to the art of war. If you look at war, and I talk about pressing, so who presses? The generals are all there at the back in the offices making the decisions and giving the radio and through. We can't. They're closing on us, so we've got to use the air force to get at them. So we've got to play over. We've got to play over. Put into the game context. They're pressing us, so we've got to play over them. The point you just made a moment ago. So we've got to play over them. If there's space, we might have to go around them down the side, or we might have to go and play through them. So we're going to have to take a few people out and play through them, bypass them. Combination, so we played through them. They broke down the ranks of the military, the defense force, to get through them. Yeah, and then you put that into the game, simplify the game, and that's the game in itself, in my opinion. In my opinion.
Yeah,
it's like a striker comes short, one goes long. Now, which one is on? York and Cole, combination play. Which one is on? And then you play that. That's why I would hate to be a young striker now, to a degree, because the strikers are not getting the opportunities. Everybody wants to play 3 or 4 in midfield. And so what's the point of having 4 strikers in your club if you're only ever going to use one?
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean,
you may have to think about playing them in different roles. Still as a striker, you may have to think about, rather than, okay, you want attacking fullbacks, but then you want to play with the 7 and 11 out there. So where's the fullbacks going to attack? Or the 7 and 11 coming off the line? Well, why not start the 7 and 11 in closer to your 9 and then have 3 strikers anyway? Yeah. And then create your movement from there. Yeah. So there's various different ways of doing it. My mentality has always been, when people talk about style and philosophy, I don't particularly like that word in football. Me personally, it's not a word that gravitates with me. I just like, for me, it's effective football. So how do you get winning football? It's got to be effective. It's got to be effective with the ball and effective without the ball. You can put another spin on that. Effective with it and destructive without it. But it's still being effective.
100%. So let's look at that then. Let's go back to your journey then. You're coming through as a young player at Aston Villa. Made the transition over to Birmingham. What were some of the biggest things in your mind? But going from being an apprentice at the time, and obviously now becoming a professional player, and how much emphasis was on your development still at that stage, as opposed to just really focusing your mindset and narrowing down on the concept of, right, it's all about winning now. And just to kind of layer on top of that as well, is at what point do you feel like it should really start to be kind of bled into the development of a young player that winning is important? Because there's a lot of people that consider winning as a dirty word. I don't personally. I think it's when you're winning at the detriment of the player's well-being, maybe both in any way, shape or form. I think that's probably where it probably maybe is a dirty word, but winning in itself, I think is actually absolutely crucial for the players to understand.
Why do you play?
Pardon, sorry?
I always say to people, why do you play? You play the sport because you love it.
Well, whether it's a sport, whether it's a game, I certainly don't go to games. Even if I'm playing PlayStation with my mates, I don't want to lose.
Okay.
I don't want to lose.
Because you want to win. That's the outcome you're looking for.
Yeah, 100%. And there's feelings associated with that.
Yeah, it's how you approach the game to give you that edge to win. So winning and development for me should go hand in hand. I've always felt that, because if people think about winning that is not important, watch when someone loses something. Watch when a child loses a game. Yeah? Why should you learn how to lose? I've never understood that concept. Nobody wants to lose at anything.
Yeah. I think learning how to deal with loss is good.
There's a difference.
But I think we've definitely gone to a culture now where it's much more, you get rewarded for taking part, and I think it does soften the player's mentality.
I was brought up on playing football, and you play to win. Yeah, it doesn't stop your development. They go hand in hand. They go hand in hand. In this country, there's a saying that, from football terms, Bobby Charlton, Bobby Moore, that 66 side, one of the greatest England side, for obvious reasons, they won the World Cup. But if you look at those players individually, they played. I worked with Alan Ball for 6 years, and you tell the gaffer Bally that this doesn't matter. Father sides, when he lost to father side, he would be the most stroppiest person you'd ever wish to meet, and that for that next 45 minutes, because he hated losing at anything. My first manager at Leeds, Billy Bremner, very similar, because you have to have a winning mentality. You're not going to win week in week every week, but you have that in you. It's instilled in you to win. I remember when I was coach at Stoke, we knocked Manchester United out of the FA Youth Cup one year, and Sir Alex was manager at the time, and he wasn't happy with his group, and he told them so, because they represented Manchester United. And even now, if you listen to Ten Hag, it's Manchester United. We are expected to win trophies. So how do you, if you don't instill at the kids when they're young, there are certain levels when it's about the actual technical development, and then when they get to a certain age, you gradually you're actually implementing that as you're going along, and then you take it to another level as you reach another level. It's more increased as you go along, more increase as you go along. So winning doesn't overtake the development; they go hand in hand. Yeah, I spent some time in Germany and Holland doing my coaching journeys, and let me tell you, winning is important at all levels, all age groups. But what they do, the emphasis on, there's a development core and there's a winning core. So in the younger stages, it's all about the development. To get to the next level, it's all about the development. We start to understanding what it means to win.
Now, what stage is that? What age group? What ages you started to play?
It's around the Spanish call it juventiles. So you're talking around then sort of 9s to 12s, so around the technical evolvement. 11 to 12, still technical involvement, but now there's certain areas of understanding what winning means. And for example, what they'll do a lot, they will play games against a lot of weaker oppositions deliberately to encourage their teams the winning mentality. It's a bit like pre-season games. You see senior clubs will play, they'll go abroad and play the top teams, and it's a competitive games, and then they'll come back and they'll play like a League One or a League Two club, lesser, or some cases send a 23 to play against a combination against a non-league team, because as they get closer to their opening fixture, they want to get back into that winning habit. So what the winning breeds confidence.
There's a danger in that, though, isn't there? Danger in that if the players are conscious that the opposition might not be as strong.
No, but you see, that's fact. But equally, they're developed in a certain way at the professional level to understand the ramifications beyond what they're doing.
Of course.
So it's almost like a training game with an emphasis on a performance and gearing up towards the next level coming up. Yeah, so they're increasing their levels now, even though they're playing against lesser opposition deliberately, to get ready now for the next challenge, which is going to be the big fish, so to speak. Yeah, because you can't play you can't build your pre-season, for example, at that high intensity games all the time. So you have to utilize it,
yeah,
to get the balance right. But at the end of it, you should come out on top.
Yeah.
So and again, that's going to enable your confidence going into the season, your confidence building.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, let's go back to your coaching.
Let me just finish that point. So there's a purpose behind that.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a purpose behind that planning. Yeah. And if you ever look at any pre-season fixtures, it's like a periodization.
Yeah.
We're building it up, because ultimately and sometimes other people go the other way. The last game they want, or the last but one game, they want a real test. Start the other end, a bit like going back to the development point with the age groups. Start the other end, get the passion and get the movement going and get the rhythm going. Now they're going up another level, more challenge. Yeah, and then the last but one is a really dinger, as we call it, to get the juices flowing, readiness for the final one.
Cool. So I'm just conscious now that obviously you coming through as a young player. When did at any point in your career as a player you start to think about these things? And when did coaching start to come on your radar? And what was it about your coaches as a young player? And obviously I keep saying young player, but what was it about the coaches back then that maybe caught your attention? So I remember speaking to one of my first ever coaches recently, and I said the one thing that kind of really got me engaged in his sessions was how his attention to finer detail. It just made me more engaged, and I thought, do you know what? Actually, I want to pay attention to this.
My coaches in my infancy, coaching was a little bit different back in those days, if you like. It was individualized. We would go back and do afternoon sessions, 2-3 afternoons a week. We'd back out. The defenders would go over there doing some heading or doing some 1v1s, 2v2s, what have you. The striker would be doing some finishing. And bear this in, I always say this to people, bear this in mind. Every time you do a 1v1 session or 2v2 sessions, you always need an attacker and you always need a defender. So if you're working 1v1s, 2v2s for the front players, what are the defenders doing? They're getting it defended. And vice versa, and so on and so forth. And if you're working a movement in midfield or whatever, then everybody's working.
Yeah.
So it's a case of now getting the players to understand what's going on, even though it's not specifically about you, but you're taking out of it what you need. And if you're doing it correctly, and the one thing that my coaches always did, they made sure it was done properly by both teams, both sets of players, whichever individual things you're working on. And how I can simplify it is this: the sessions were all around game related, because ultimately that's what it's about. Game related sessions in subgroups, small sided, 1v1s, individual and collective.
Yeah. So what would a typical session look like there? Because I think there's always this misconception, right? That if we go back to our previous point about winning not being kind of the priority, maybe as often as it should be. I think there's a lot of critical thoughts around how academia has kind of
influenced things.
It's almost kind of taken the focus away around, subconsciously people are not, it's kind of coincided with this mindset of, it's not about winning, but actually it's about using different approaches and supporting players in this way and that way and this way. But actually, I'm from the conversations that that we've had in the past, and even what you're sharing now, has it changed at all?
It hasn't changed, but it hasn't, but it has. And there's more influences who will tell you that this way is the right way and that way is the wrong way. And that way, and back in what we used to do 20 years ago, is absolutely a waste of time. Forget all that. Nothing was right. Nothing was ever good. Nothing was ever good. But it's funny, isn't it? Nothing was ever good back then, but it was all how interesting how the English clubs, 77 Liverpool, yeah, I think it was 80, 77, 78 Liverpool, 80 Forest, 81 Forest, 82 Villa, and then so on. And the point I'm making is we're all the English club dominating the European Cup and winning it. With no foreign players, by the way, apart from English, the people from the British Isles in the mainland and the Republic of Ireland. That was your foreign players. Yeah? But what did Liverpool do? They played a European style of football. So you adapt. You adapt. And that's what you had to do. You still play your two big centre forward, big centre halves. Fullbacks will push on one side, one will stay. Up your side, you go, the other one covers round. As Guardiola did at Bayern when he pushed Philipp Lahm or David Alaba into midfield to make that three. Liverpool did it great. They talk about a false nine, Kenny Dalglish or a 10. Dalglish was doing that for years, dropping in and make a 10. People played with two strikers back in there, one on, one off. There's your 10. So the game hasn't really, it's evolved, but it hasn't evolved.
It has, and I think there's been a lot of ex-players and people that have been in the game for a long time who've actually shared more recently quite a few frustrations in terms of how people are trying to rebrand the game with new terminology, new phrases, new trends. But actually, these are things that have just, from my experience and my understanding, just gone in cycles.
Yeah, I think the one beauty I would say about the modern way of doing things is that it's like having a cake. You bake the cake, and we're going to put the icing on the cake, but we're now going to put a bit of sparkle on it. Yeah, to give it that extra little bit of great presentation to the eyes, and also a little bit of crunch behind it, and it's terrific. Don't get me wrong. I think there's a lot of nuances that's come into the game that's really enhanced the game. But in my makeup, I'm not any longer in coaching, as you know. In my head, the principles of the game will never ever change, because it's 11v11.
Yeah.
There's a goal at one end and there's a goal at the other end. My job to stop you putting into my net, and I'm going to put it on. I've got to try and put it into your net.
100%.
What we're doing here, yeah, to do that, you can do it in various different ways. And if you've got the right players to play a certain way, do it.
Yeah.
If you haven't got the right players to do it this way and you've got players to do it that way, then mix it and do it. That's the game, in my opinion.
I think the conversation I always have with coaches in similar. It's funny you use the analogy of a cake. Like I literally put it that way as well. It's like one thing that we have to we're all in agreement. At the end of this, we need a cake.
Yeah.
Now, whether you want a chocolate cake, a marble cake, or Victoria sponge cake, that's your business. But at the end of it, it needs to be a cake. I.e., we strip it right back. As you said, my job is to try and score in your goal and stop you from scoring in mine, and vice versa. That's the bottom. That's the bottom line. And if that's not the priority, then that's not the game.
Yeah. Like I said, different ways of doing it, different approaches, and what have you. And you as a coach recognize how you're outnumbering somebody in the central areas or in the wide areas. The other coach thinking, well, if they're outnumbering me here, what do I need to do to make sure, stop them not outnumbering me? So you're thinking all the time, and you're working all the time as a coach. But the question you posed a moment ago, where did it start for me in terms of my coach journey? My coach journey actually started at 16. And you might think 16. Yeah, what I did. Because what I did, I went back to my old Sunday school, my Sunday team that I used to play for, boys team, as a young player at 16, and just helped out with the 10s, on the 11s, on the 9s, whatever, the junior team. We didn't have 10s and 9s and such. It was more the second team, on the 11s, on the 12s sort of thing. That's how I started. Every time I go back to my parents in Birmingham and I drive past, I say to my grandkids, that's where I played my first football game in terms of a Sunday league team. Yeah. There's a 3G on there now, but it was 2 grass pitches when I do it. So I know where it is, and it holds a lot to me, because that's where a manager, my first manager, took me, for someone recommended for my school team and said, boom, 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 and I went and I played there. So that's where, I would then go back and help the team out in the coaching as I became more, if you like, in the realms of professional game and apprentice. Then I came on. I carried on doing it. Wherever I've been as a player, I've always coached a team, whether it's a pub team, whether it's the local playgroup team. I say playgroup, in terms of the youth club teams or whatever. I did some work voluntary in the past as a youth worker, and I take the teams. And so there's many ways to learn to become a coach, and so that was really my infancy in my coaching journey.
Your playing journey. Then, how old were you when you finally stepped away from playing?
I was in my 40th year.
Okay, so you was in your 40th year. So you got the best part of 24 years of playing and having influences around coaching. So I guess if you start your journey back at 16, by the time you got to 40, you would have had a really different outlook on what that should look like and what it could look like. So what were some of the major things throughout your playing career which started to shape the way that you maybe thought coaching should look?
I had some really influential managers. When I was at Villa, I didn't really pay attention to coaching, what was going on, but I knew what was going on in terms of development. I knew my coaches cared. Yeah. I knew the coaches put our well-being first and foremost, because that's what we saw on a daily basis. Yeah. Simple little thing like, you don't look so well. Go in and see the physio. Not like now where the physio's on the grass with you. The physio was never on the grass with us. Physio's in the treatment room treating players. So if we had an injury, we were told to go in. If there's something seriously wrong, someone collapsed or whatever, someone sprinting and get him out. No mobile phones, and our training ground, the block was further away from the pitches, obviously, and stuff like that. So all those things you got used to, but we knew there was a caring and the environment was good, and so on and so forth. Coaches that I worked with, you could see, thinking back at the way they worked, very detailed in everything that they did. Everything was structured, nothing off the cuff. There's a plan of work. We're going to follow that plan of work and that syllabus. And then, for example, if we we did a lot of individual work. And if we then went into like an 8v8, or if we used to play like 5-a-side back in the day, Yeah, but there was an emphasis on defenders play as a defender, and you can step in and join in at the appropriate time. Forward wanted to score goals. Yeah, goalkeepers sometimes would play in goal, sometimes they'd play out. It's like people talking about play the keepers out now and get them joining with the session. Well, keepers have been doing that for years. Yeah, one of the keepers I played with, a guy called Tony Court, the Man United goalkeeping coach when they won the treble. Yeah, TC, one of the best outfield players I saw, but he's a goalkeeper. But what a left foot he had. Yeah, technically very, very good. Yeah, so it was a key, and also different. Back in the day, goalkeepers were huge. Different body definition and composition. Yeah, you had 6'4", 6'4", 6'5" goalkeepers. You don't get that tall goalkeepers as such now, unless you're a Fraser Forster. Normally, you'll get about a 5'11", 6 foot 6'1". Yeah, Peter Cech, I think, was probably one of the tallest. The latter stages. The year is about 5, just like 6'1", 6'2", you know, and so on and so forth. So
do you think there's just an acceptance now that actually you don't have to fit a set profile anymore? I think there's a more of an acceptance that, you know, we can have variety, we can have different people, because ultimately it's no longer about, my experiences anyway, there's less emphasis now on how things are done, but more emphasis on, is it getting done?
Again, for me, from my observations, a combination of both. You'll go one place and it's this, or one place and it's the latter. Yeah. So it's a case of, for me, as I said, coaching is about being effective, a bit like playing, being effective for that group of people I'm working with at a particular time. Now, again, because I did say I don't particularly like the word philosophy, but people may have their habits and their style of play. Yeah. And that's what they're going to bring through to their club. So they've within their club, they've got a culture. That's why certain managers get lambasted about playing. I worked with Tony Pulis at Stoke City. Yeah. Tony's teams are hard to beat. Funny enough, when I played at Aston Villa as a kid, our teams were hard to beat. When I played at Portsmouth, our teams were hard to beat. It's funny that, isn't it? At Leeds were hard to beat. When they got promotion at Portsmouth in the 42 league game, we conceded 26 goals. But we scored a lot of goals, and we played 4-4-2, 4-4-1-1. We played with two wingers, out and out wingers. A lad called Vince Lair from Crystal Palace, and another one called Kevin O'Callaghan, who's at Ipswich and played for Republic of Ireland. We had two central midfield players, Mick Kennedy, God rest his soul, and Kevin Dillon. Yeah? The two centre halves, myself and the lad Billy Gilbert, like I described. Kenny Swain, white right back, Paul Hardeman left back, and obviously people came in, like Mick Tate and people like that. Paul Marin and Mick Quinn up front. Villa was the same. Winning European Cup, First Division. Two centre halves came at Alan Evans. Two fullbacks, Colin Gibson and Kenny Swain, or Gary Williams if Gibbo weren't playing. Dennis Mortimer, Gordon Cowans. Tony Morley, Des Bremner. Peter with Gary Shaw. Liverpool. Yeah. Ray Clements, Phil Neal, Alan Kennedy. Yeah. Phil Thompson or Mark Lawrence in the air, Mark Lawrence and Alan Hansen. Yeah. Whether it be Sammy Lee or Jimmy Case at the flank, Ian Rush and Kenny Dalglish, and so on and so forth. Forest is exactly the same. So the point I'm making is, whatever players you've got, you're still playing effective winning football, and culturally. And what was being done then is being done now. And what's being done now was done then. In the main, there are subtle differences, of course.
Yeah, you're going to get that right through generational differences, cultural differences, especially now in England, where at the top level in particular, we're starting to see come in.
You're just going to be quiet.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, better. Yeah.
Yeah, so just saying, obviously, more and more foreign influences are coming in. So
Yeah.
there is naturally going to be those subtle changes, and especially like I said, with the generation of coaches becoming younger and younger, and how they're maybe influencing different ways than maybe I was 15, 20 years ago, and maybe you were, when you were that age. It's almost, we've got to accept, obviously, there's change in the world and society, but I think
and embrace it.
yeah, 100%. Definitely
Embrace
embrace it
it.
because obviously you get left behind if you don't. But I think
Embrace
it's
it in the
also
right way. Embrace it in
yeah,
the right way.
110%. And I think it is about ever evolving and on that, but not losing sight about what the game is actually about. And I mean, I guess my mind's kind of going, and I've never shared this with you, but I remember when I first started coaching. This is in probably around 2009, probably when you started with the FA, and funnily enough, in terms of that period of time where you was with the development teams and the youth teams. And I actually remember, seeing a session that you delivered, and saying, "I want to be like him. I want to be like him." And it wasn't because of anything particular that you did. It was just almost. There was almost a freedom to the way you coached, freedom to the way you coached in terms of how you connected with the players that you worked with. It wasn't necessarily my way or the highway, but there was almost like, no, I'm going to hold you accountable. I'm going to make sure that, we're pushing you to be the best you can as a player, but we're also going to allow you to express yourself, which is almost a revelation in some ways because you don't see that often. Often when you get to that stage of the game and that level of the game, it probably is a bit my way or the highway.
Yeah, you see, my like I said to you, go back to my analogy of Villa or reflections in Villa developing. Holistic development is important. You hear that a lot. Holistic development.
Where did that come from though? Because was that something that was genuinely spoken about, or was it just something that was done?
It was just accepted. It was just a done thing. So within that, there's also challenges, and within the challenges, you're allowed to express yourself. If you don't express yourself, you can't be challenged. You don't know where you can take it, and that is the way it was. So as a coach, I was already being influenced, and then I went and worked. Like I said, I had Alan Ball as well. It was very much that way inclined, and then I had Alan Wilkinson. I was doing things, and I didn't appreciate him at the time. I have to say, as much as I should have done, looking back on it. But when I started to really get deep into coaching now, my not coming towards the end, but still thinking about going to coaching. I always wanted to become a coach. Even when I was, like I said, from 16, I was doing it. So in my head, I was already there. I wanted to do it. And I started to look at things. And he came and, the diets and psychological aspects of things and the way of training. Well, it started to now really have an impact on me. And every day was a challenging day. Every day was a training day, a learning day. So you had to learn about not just the technical, the tactical, the holistic development. So people-centeredness became really important without me realizing it initially. But then I started thinking, hang on a minute, I can see what the gaffer was doing there, I can see what they were doing there. Now I've got it. Now I've got it. Now I've got it. So it would have been wrong of me then not to have that as I guess, an influence on me to a degree. To make, because obviously if you start to think about something's triggered you, it's influenced you in some way. And now I'm thinking people-centered, holistic development, challenges, expression at the right times, and so on and so on. Right. And that's the way I coached. But beyond that, there was a lot of detail behind what I wanted to do and how I worked. Because the detail was in the crux. On my coach education journey, I was blessed to have worked, with people like Dick Beck, God rest his soul, Don Howe, and people like that. Alec Gibson, Martin Hunter, Steve Rutter, some really good top quality coach educator, John Peacock, who I worked with at the FA. And they would always break things down. Process. People frown upon it. But I'm going to teach a young child to do this. And I'm in a classroom. And you're teaching them, and you just go boom, 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 boom. It goes over their heads. When I was taught many years ago, I don't know if you remember Peter Shreve, the old Tottenham manager, assistant manager, Pete. And Pete said, he used to say, whenever he's not in work or the coach in the football world, the manager, he was all the cabbie, so he ordered a second job. So I became a qualified. I'm a qualified teacher, but I don't want to go in the classroom week in, week out, day in, day out. But what I would do, I would volunteer. I'd go into some supply work where possible, and some when they do the exams and support the exam. Vigilator. So I'll do those sort of things. And I used to do a lot of work with S&C children who had issues, obviously. And then the more you do things like that with children like who've got those sort of issues, you've got to do one thing. You've got to break things down, chunk it down, and go into detail. Coaching is no different.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, and I think one of the things that I've picked up in my journey is being able to break it down is obviously one part of it. I think one of the biggest observations I've got though is where coaches really can let themselves down in really being effective in that process is how well they actually check and clarify understanding of how the message is landed.
Mm-hmm.
You can break it down to the nth degree, but if someone doesn't understand, it doesn't matter how many times you break it down or what you break it down to. So
it's checking as you're going along. Checking as you're going along, and there's no. And I go back to Don Howe.
Yeah.
What the one day he said he did something at Lillishall before St George's Park, Lillishall, and he did something, and I thought it was very clever. And as a coach, I picked up on it and I started to do it all the time. I would use different coloured cones. So if I'm going to go, let's say I'm going to have an 8v8 possession, but then I want to make it bigger to go into a 9v9, extend it or whatever, bring the keepers in or whatever. All he did, he put one set of cones down in, and then the next bigger cones down on the outside. And I kept looking at it, and then as I'm watching he was going, because I used to go out early and watch. I used to like to watch coaches set up. So he made one end smaller deliberately, and he looked across to one of the coaches, and the little nod went, and I thought there's something that I wonder what he's doing. I'm wondering what I didn't know what he was doing, but I'm wondering what he's doing. And then the session was going on, and what have you. And then he went, hold it there, have a drink. So all the lads were having a drink. He went, watch. I did this, but I recognised the pitch is too small. So he just took those cones away and just moved them back. And he's got what he wants. But he was actually making a point to the coaches about, as your session is evolving, checking and understanding. If it's not right, do not be afraid to alter. Because if you kept it going at that all the time for 40 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it is, what's the learning outcomes? The learning outcomes look differently. So in answer to your question, that is a way. Checking as you're going along. You allow, and the A license and all that, and B license, you talk about free play. Just let it go. You need to see what the players understand. You need to see, go back to the children in the classroom, what they understand. You need to give them their heads. You need to allow them to express themselves for you to know what they have to say.
I think as much as it is about checking down, it's also checking activities right for them.
You're just going a little bit low again.
Yeah, sorry. I was saying as much as it is about checking what they understand, it's about making sure that the activity is actually appropriate and right for them.
Yeah.
And I think one of the key points that you've touched there about, not being afraid to adjust it. Because I say it to coaches all the time, especially when I'm working with them, you know, in mentoring capacity as well. In that, if you've seen something's not working, why are you letting it continue? You're now wasting time. That's wasting time. I think there's a difference between if you haven't seen it and then you've observed it and you allow it to continue. I think, you know, you're not capitalizing on that, because, you know, what happens now if you make that observation within the first 5 minutes of, I don't know, a 90-minute session? Are you just gonna let the rest of the 85 minutes go to waste? I think you have to be confident as a coach that actually just because you've got a session plan doesn't mean that that's exactly how it runs the session. It's just in some ways a roadmap to how you're going to get there and what you're going after. But it's no definitive in that. If you've identified something, and I think the biggest part of coaching for me is actually how well can you observe.
I was just going to use the exact same phraseology. Observation. That's why in your checklist, observation is important. Recognize something, and a match day, manager on the sidelines, because they're not out there playing now, but they're making decisions because based on their observations that, hey, this fullback keeps getting inside our wide play and get the wrong side of him, adjust your position, or your midfield players playing early, get closer to him to stop him from playing early. So that's observation. That's checking and observing what you can do. The players haven't seen it, but other manager on the sidelines or someone upstairs radioing down to you. This is going on, Gaffer. Da 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 da. Make you just. If you don't make the adjustment, what's going to happen? Likely you're going to get beat. It's going to cause you a problem. So make the adjustment.
100%. I mean, I'm conscious of time, but I'm conscious of so many things that we haven't really touched on yet. But, you know, I guess the thing that's going through my head is, you know, you've had so many experiences as a player. And, you know, wonderfully, you've obviously started off by saying, actually, I became a coach when I started playing at 16. Or when I became, you know, a scholar at 16 and an apprentice at 16. So it's like, you know,
I'm glad he rephrased that, because I was an apprentice, not a scholar.
Yeah. Okay, that's what I was going to say. So, you know, it's best part maybe 4 decades that, you know, you've had those experiences now. So, you know, obviously, and there would have been so many changes, not just from that point to the end of your playing career, but obviously from the end of your playing career to going fully fledged into the coaching and the management capacity, and now where you're at now, having kind of maybe stepped away somewhat from the coaching, but actually still working with coaches and managers in a mentoring capacity. So, I guess it'd be really interesting to hear if you had to go back to the start of the coaching journey, maybe not at 16, but maybe at the end of your playing career more specifically, knowing what you know now, with all the experiences that you've had, all the different environments you've been exposed to and the people that you've been influenced by, maybe, what would be like, maybe like the top 3 things that you wish you knew back then, knowing what you know now?
One of the things I look back on, and I wish I'd had this at that particular time, was to put myself first a bit more. Now that might sound strange. Be more self-centered in terms of, if I was more self-centered, I think I could have stepped further with self-belief, because people look at me. This again, everybody's got a perception of people, haven't they? And they've got this fixation about my physicality. Okay, even people I played with. And remember one former player, colleague of mine, went to the TV big way, and he said to me one day, I went to the studio to announce in England under 19 squad for European finals, and he said to me one day, "Big man, you know what I'm going to go say, don't you?" I said, "What are you going to say?" He said, "I didn't see it. Didn't see me being a coach." But I said, "Well, you got perceptions though, haven't you? It doesn't matter to me what your perception is. Someone I respected and I liked, but it didn't really matter to me. But at the time, it did." So I would say, in that respect, I wish I'd have been myself more, and that allowed others to affect me. And that might sound strange to a lot of people, because they'll see me and they'll see, like I said, my stature and this and what I've gone on to do in the game or whatever. But initially, I allowed people to affect me.
So what does that look like practically? Because I'm thinking about it from certain coaches and
Right.
some of the coaches that I'm working with at the moment, especially younger ones who maybe are not sure really what that means to be themselves right now, because they see some of the influences, they see other coaches around them, and I see a lot of imitation going on.
People. Well, I was a very shy person, and I still think I'm shy. Not to the entity that I was, but I know I'm shy. So you're reluctant to do things. You're reluctant to express yourself. Yeah, and what that was one of my things initially. I was reluctant to do things because I was thinking, I wonder what they're thinking. I wonder what they're thinking. And one of the hardest things for coaches is to work in front of their peers, even lads like myself who have played hundreds of games or whatever, because you always want approval. But in the end, I just said this: the reason why I'm here is because I'm good enough. In the latter stages, the reason why I was here in the mid stages, I'm on a journey. So to get that journey from A to B, I need to get on that bus. So I always say, I use an expression: if you miss a bus back in the day, what do you do? Do you run after that one that's gone, or do you wait?
Me, it depends how far I've missed it by.
Yeah. I'm gonna give you. I'm gonna give you. I'm gonna give you a little. It's a fact. And it's a true story. With a little bit of a jovial thing behind it. We're in Montague with our under-16s, and one of our players, and he won't mind me saying it, Saido Berino. Saido's a terrific striker from there, and he missed a couple of chances in the first half. I think we were playing somebody like I think it was Russia. And no, it was Uruguay, and he missed a couple of chances. And at half time, I said to him, "What are you worried about?" I was assistant to Kenny Swain. I said, "What are you worried about?" And the lad said, he missed a couple of chances. I said, "Don't worry." So I said, let me ask you a question. And again, because I had that relationship with people, go back to the holistic thing. When you miss a bus, what do you do? So, or when he had to go, he said, "I'd get a lift." I said, "I forget he couldn't get a lift. Before you could get a lift, what do you do?" So I'd get a bus. And if you missed the bus, what would you do? He said, "I'd wait for the next one." I said, "Good. Why would you wait for the next one?" Because that, like you just said, the other one's gone too far, depending how it's gone, but that one's gone, I can't chase that. All right, so another one's going to come along. Yeah. He says, "Keep doing what you're doing because you're getting in there. Can you finish?" Yeah. Well, just relax and finish. Scored actually second half. So when they came in, he was with Ross Barkley and one or two others. I remember Ross in particular, and they were giggling away, and they were looking at me and giggling. I said, "Well, what is he giggling at?" So he waited for the bus. So you see the influence of the people, the holistic. Keep doing what you're doing because we believe in you. Yeah. So there's your learning outcomes. If I said to him, change your runs and hold on a minute, those 10 crosses are coming in, but he's not in there now all of a sudden. But it's that belief. Now I wish I'd had that belief when I was a younger coach. But as I evolved, I started to say to myself, this is what I'm about. This is what I'm going to do for the right reasons, and there's a reason behind it, and this is the process. How have I been taught? There's a reason why I've been taught, and I've got this. Why do I understand what I've been taught? Or why do I understand it? And that's the key for me. Yes, I understand it, but what is it I understand about that? So I've always been that one, and the other one for me, which links into that, is to put the players, put yourself first, because you need to deliver, but also put your players at the center of everything that you do. Because if you're right, you'll be right for them, and then you can go ahead. And also, you touched on it earlier, to not, and I mentioned it in our sessions yesterday with the conversation we're having with the CV things. Do not be afraid to be adaptable. Do not be afraid to be adaptable. Yeah, and that's how I've coached. Just be adaptable, because coaching is about situational. Yeah, life is about situational. I want to go for a walk, but it's raining. What do I do? Do I still want to go for a walk? If I do, what do I need to do? I need to put a coat on or a rain jacket. So I can still go for the walk. If I don't put that on and I still want to go, I'm going to get soaked. Situational. Life, football's no different, in my opinion. And that's how I. I remember, I was away with England, and I coached with Belgium and Scotland, and I forget what did the nation was. I know definitely Belgium and Scotland. I think it was Switzerland, and the coach said to me, the coaches said to me, "Coach, can we have a chat? 'Cause we used to meet at the same hotels and whatnot." And yeah, talk and speak or whatever. It says, "Can you explain to me why and how your teams are always your team change within the game, and you say very little, and what have you?" And basically, what we did, we would change systems as the game is evolving, because the minute the ball rolls, is your system, what is it, 4-4-2 or 4-3-3 or 3-5, whatever? It's changed automatically because the ball's moved, and the players have to move into somewhere else. What does Guardiola do? They're all moving.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So I just said to him, it's situational, but we worked on it, that they understand when to step in and when to step back, when to press, when not to press, when to make it compact, when not to make it compact. So in other words, we're compact, we want to expand, so we want to be big and wide as possible to give them a problem so we can play through or round or over, whatever, depending on what have you. So we practice. So you're checking your understanding, and now we say to them, "Show me," because the game's the exam. Show me. So now I can see what they've picked up, what they understand, and then they deliver.
100%. I think the real subtle part to what you're saying there. This is what I say to coaches all the time: is that game, when they get to it, you refer to it as an exam, but I think it's also, this is an opportunity for you as a coach to hold yourself accountable, recognize, actually, have you done what you think you've done in terms of preparing the players effectively? Have the messages landed in the way that you wanted them to do? And can you trust the job that you've actually done, or are you just going off ego? Yeah, I've did my part, and then actually still being in control on match day, telling them what to do, how to, making all decisions for them, and not trusting the job that you maybe should, that you've been tasked to do, essentially.
Yeah, you see, there's some coaches, and I was one of these for a long time, where I wasn't a churchgoer, as I call it, on the sideline. I wasn't one to sit there. I was never one of those. If you wanted me one of those, don't appoint me, because I was never one of those. There were things going on in this country for a long time. We follow suit. We speak to what we're talking about, the coaching. We follow trend. We follow suit. A foreign coach comes in, doesn't say anything. It's okay. We all do that. And then the foreign coach comes in, and he's, they say, oh, he's getting his players at it. He's working the players and it's done. But a British coach does it, and he's animated. He's too animated. He's too that. So I just said, you know what? I need to be authentic, and I need to be me. As a defender, as a player, I drove players. Come in here, tuck in here, boom, push on it. As a coach, on the training ground, I did the same thing. I worked my players. Match days, I would always work my defenders. And there's a reason why I work my defenders. Because I didn't want to concede. So I made sure when I could see they were doing something wrong, it's like you're having a child or a grandchild at home, you see they put their hand next to the fire. Are you going to allow them to get burnt? And then you go, told you. No, you can see it's happening. Tuck in. And then I watched Jurgen Klopp and Sir Alex Ferguson and Arsene Wenger and Mikel Arteta now, and even Pep. So you need players, no matter who they are, they all need reminders. You're not playing the game for them, just giving them reminders at the appropriate time.
100%, because obviously from a coaching perspective, you're constantly looking out for these things. They're in the midst of the game, so I think the challenge is how well can you align them with what should be happening and checking in with them, making sure they understand that, you know, if something's a new concept for them, they're not going to get it every time. Yes, we want to give them some ownership, we want to give them some experiences and give them some freedom to play the game, but actually, because it's still a new concept in some cases, they're not going to remember it all the time. And if we recognize and we're open and honest with ourselves as coaches to understand that, then it becomes situational, like you said.
And then the other thing what they need to understand, in my opinion, is recognizing when you put something forward, it takes time to be digested. When you eat your food, it takes time to digest it. Players learning or anybody learning is the same thing. That's why with mentoring, we'll have a discussion, as you know. You have the discussion around about whatever the agenda is, and then I'm not on top of you because I need you to go away and reflect. I need to go away and reflect, and that is the key. So when you do your practices, players need to go away. That didn't go so well for me today. Well, why didn't it go so well for me today? Yeah, I didn't quite get it. Well, speak to the coach. Speaking with your teammates. Joey, what did you think of that? Oh, I understood that. We should have done that. Oh, I knew. I got it now. Go back to the classroom. And I always use a good example of maths. Now, I'm not a great maths person or whatever. In particular, to be honest with you, I don't like the subject. It just scares the hell out of me for whatever reason, I don't know. Maybe I've got a phobia about it. I don't know, whatever. But my point is this. You give a child a sum, and I always use fractions as a good example. They're doing this, doing that, and then you come to check their work, and you notice that they've got it slightly wrong. You don't then take them away and then destruct everything. That was rubbish. That wasn't good. That. And then you got to do it all over again. No. Quick. You've done boom, 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 but you're only a number down or a point down. Yeah. So you instead of being 4.5, 3.5 or whatever. So you said go back. Your method is good up to a point. So the method is good. Now just have a look at that for me and see where you can get to that 4 by moving your decimal point one space, and then what have you got now? Oh, so the method's fine. The method's fine. It's just a matter of that little thing. So you're checking how they've come to that conclusion. Why they come to that conclusion, and the reason they've come to the conclusion is just one thing's not being in place.
And that's where the checking understanding, you're looking at the working out and obviously recognizing, okay, how far down the process are they along the right track?
Yes.
Where they start to shift to the point where actually, okay, we've identified where the error is, or where the misunderstanding or the misperception has come from. No, I get that. So you talked there about being authentic, being adaptable. What else would there be?
For me, one of my biggest things that I felt anyway as a coach is be engaging.
I think that's a brilliant one, because over the last few days I've had a few conversations with different coaches who have said the players don't want to show, the players don't look like they want to be there, the players show up and it's like they don't care, and my thoughts straight away go to, well, maybe at younger ages, sometimes you get a point where players come to sessions because their parents have just dropped them off. I get that. You get to a certain stage where that doesn't become it. That's not a thing. Maybe 14 upwards, 13 upwards, maybe, depending on the child.
Yeah.
Definitely at 15, 16. Listen, the kid's not showing up to come play football unless they want to come play football. So if they're switching off and then you feel like you're messing about, the bottom line is, whether you like it or not, your session's not good enough.
You're right what you're saying, that the players have to feel a sense of belonging. It's like football in many ways reflects and resembles life. If you don't feel wanted, you don't deliver. you got more chance of getting what you're looking for if someone belongs, or you can engage with somebody and you build a rapport, you build a relationship with people. Yeah. And even if you don't quite maximize everything, that person will still give you more, gravitate towards you more, because they can see what you know, what that you're engaging with them, and you've got time for them. And time can be a personable, time can be the football aspect of it, but within the environment you've created, that they can gravitate towards you and people within the group. And that's what I go back to my beginning at Villa. That's what we had. Even to the point now, if I need to pick the phone up and speak to any of those lads, then I can.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to say, because obviously we come completely different journeys, different experiences, and one of the things that I've always said to myself is that it's like that old phrase, right? People only want to know how only care how much you know when they know how much you care. And I've always said that the coach's way to spell the word care is TIME.
Mm-hmm.
It's by giving them that time, and it's by and it's not exhaustive.
No,
it's not a lot of time, but it's dedicated time. It's intentional time. It's deliberate time. So even as little as rocking up to sessions, I'm like, oh no, how was your day? You know what I mean? Those little things, and I think one of the most recent things that's kind of really just made me reflect and think, oh wow, actually that's quite interesting. I had a situation about a month ago, and I was supporting another coach, and he was delivering on a match day, and the team, it was a cup game, and the team won 4-0. And I had my observations throughout the game. I was there for the whole game, and in my opinion, the team played nowhere near well enough. Yeah, they won 4-0, but they scored 4 opportunities out of probably 35. Now, what was interesting was he done his debrief at the end of the game, and he had a conversation with the players, and then he looked over to me and said, have you got anything you want to add? And I deliberated for a second. And I thought, yeah, actually I do. Well done on winning the game. My honest opinion is it wasn't good enough. And I thought for a second, should I not do that? But then I thought to myself, my job at the end of the day is to help the players become better.
Mm-hmm.
My job at the end of the day is maybe to give the coach some guidance and support around maybe different ways of working. And one of the things I'm kind of, I hold true to is coaches need to hold themselves and their players accountable.
Yeah.
Now, just because they've got a level of success in terms of winning the game, yeah, well done to them. They, praise them on what they've been able to achieve. Actually, hold them accountable to a standard. Yeah. And don't just accept, you won 4-0. Actually, no, it wasn't good enough. If we come back to your analogy earlier around using the preseason games as training games, this was the perfect opportunity for that. Are you maximize? We know that we're going to, going into this game, you're probably the stronger team. You're probably going to win. Yeah. So you shouldn't be, to some extent, you shouldn't be celebrating the fact that you won because you was expecting that.
Yeah.
You should be, you should be celebrating the level of success beyond the result that you managed to achieve in the game. So, but what was interesting in the reflection for me was that the first question I asked him after he sent the players off, because that was the only comment I made to the players. First question I asked him was, how did you find it? And the first thing that he said to me before anything else was, if I'd said that to them, there would have been chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh, that's quite interesting. But then he's also been facing certain challenges with that group as well. And I said, okay, well, I think the major difference is that they understand, for me, that whenever I say anything, it's never coming from a place other than this guy cares about us.
Yeah.
And that relationship and that precedent has already been set to the point where they know whatever I say, even if it is a critique, they're never going to take it the wrong way. And then I liken it to I use the analogy of vegetables. Whether we like them or we don't, we know they're good for us.
They're good for you.
Do you know what I mean? So, because I've already set the precedent that I care about their development, I want them to get better, whether they like it or not. They're going to take what I say and accept it.
Yeah.
Within reason. So it's quite interesting to to get your views in terms of
No,
actually
as you were
having that
talking,
relationship.
I was just jotting a couple of things down for my coaching umbrella, if you like. And when you're working with players, and as you said, they'd have won the game, and it could have been a lot more, but the fact that they missed a number of chances, and they could have done better, so they're a thing there. So there are times, especially when you're working with development, you can win a game, but what have you actually, apart from the result, what have you actually achieved? Okay. So sometimes in victory, it's a great time to reflect. Great time to reflect. So I'll just thinking about it, just taking my coaching head back to when I was coaching and the little things we used to do to emphasize your point. So we could simplify and say, okay, in possession, we're going to look at this. We're going to look at retain or counter. So we've won it back. We're going to retain it. Is it on to counter or is it retain or play early? So it's the same sort of similar thing. We're going to look at width. I'm going to look at penetration. That's three things in possession. So we've won the game. Did we get those things in the game? So that's the learning outcome we're looking for. The result will take care of itself, one way or the other. So we set a target within the game, especially when you work in development. So there are our learning outcomes. Yeah, as a team. Yeah. So we're looking at retain or play forward early, or counter attack quick, or keep it. We can't always counter, even though we want it. Can't always counter quickly. Yeah. And then we're looking at width and penetration. Okay, so how do we penetrate? We spoke about it at the beginning. You can penetrate over the top, around the sides, boom, boom, whatever, diagonals, whatever. Switch play, whatever term you want to put on it. So whatever the result is, we're going to say, okay, did we achieve that? So that's our targets within the learning outcome. And if we did, how did we do it?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting way to look at it. I mean, I was thinking back about what you said earlier around, the art of war and comparing that to the principles, and mine's probably a little bit more silly. I look at it as that, that children's book. We're going on a bear hunt.
Yeah.
We're going to catch a big one, right? Essentially, if you use that as an analogy, well, we can't go over it, can't go around it. So what we're going to do eventually, we're going to go through it. And I kind of say, right, well, we're going to do things in reverse. Can we go through it? If we can't go through it, we might have to go around it. And if we can't go around it, we might have to go over it.
Situational.
100%. But the key thing I've always said to them, is don't be scared. Like, do what's needed, right? And I think the beauty of it is, and I think we come back to even the cake analogy. End of the day, we're trying to get a cake.
Yeah.
What type of cake we end up developing is a separate thing. That's where the influences, the situational aspects come into it, the context comes into it. Am I playing, in the Premier League? Am I playing in La Liga? Or wherever else am I playing? Am I who are the opposition? How does our cake now need to be different because we're playing against this opposition, against that opposition? Is there enough considerations around those variables? And ultimately the list is endless, right, around the considerations that could be made. But the one thing that we need to kind of maintain that is everything should be leading back to that cake.
Yeah, and within that you talk about respecting the opposition.
Yeah,
because they have a part to play in your performance.
100%.
And people forget that, you see. And then the other side of it, that's the in possession analogy I've given you, and the out of possession thing I'm saying. Out of possession, press or drop. Now people talk about low blocks and high blocks and this and that. You see, if it's under press, you press. If it's not under press, we drop. And when we're set, we'll go together.
Yeah.
Don't press in isolation. Don't press in isolation. If you go in isolation, if you're in war, out of war again, and you go and you take that jet up there on your own, they're going to blow you down. You got no cover.
Yeah.
So think about the game, cover and support, out of possession.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you look at that, and then you go, my mentality is always, I always want to show outside. From the front, in their back third, if my wide players can show outside, get them outside, we lock them off down the channel, because everybody knows what's going down there, and we just work in unison. You don't want them coming through, especially international football. You don't want the opportunity to play through the centre of you, because there's more options for them. Yeah. So you're now reliant on your 1v1 defending. If they gets beaten, then the support cover is on automatically, because you're in that position already, ready to rock, as we call it, ready to rock and roll, as we call it. And then from there, if you're showing outside, you're getting compact centrally. Now, we've lost the game, but did those things in the main take place? Did they score from a wonderful free kick? But in the main, those things took place. We can work. What do we do next week? We work on defending set plays, and we make sure that we keep those good things going. Yeah.
I think there's something very subtle in there as well right now. It's that recognizing that what allowed those good things to take place. And what I mean by that, and coming back to your point about respecting your position and understanding that, I'll give you an example. My team's been great from playing up from the back for the last 10 games. But actually, if I reflect back on it, the oppositions have never pressed me and stopped me from playing out from the back. So have they really been great from playing out from the back, or have they been great from playing out from the back against a team that doesn't press? But then in game 11, now all of a sudden the team presses. We're no good at playing out from the back anymore. So which one is it? You know what I mean? And it's also recognizing is the observation actually what's happening, or is there actually the observation of what's happening without the context making a completely different story? Yeah. So I think it's just really important to kind of pay attention to those things. Are your team actually doing this? And then is that what it just looks like?
Yeah, and then I'll set you another challenge in a different way. If you recognize, we talked about adaptability earlier. If you recognize that they're playing out from the back, and but the opposition are not really pressing us and making us make decisions, we're not making challenge decisions. Okay, so now all of a sudden you might then set a training session up where you're challenging them in training to see when the eventuality comes along, when someone's really pressing them now, what are their capabilities?
Yeah, 100%. It's about managing the opposition to
exactly.
to get your scenarios out right and manipulating the practice in that way. But and I think it's a great point, because I think that's another thing that maybe doesn't get often discussed anymore as much as it used to, around the difference between facilitating, coaching, and managing practices.
Yeah. You see, people talk a lot about, again, trends are Joe Blogs does it this way, Fred Smith doesn't do it that way. Well, do you know what? I've always respected the opposition, because without them, there's no game. And they're going to give me a problem, and I've got to solve that problem, and I want to give them a problem. And hopefully they can't solve my problem. But if they're going to solve my problem, I've got to be ready for them. I'll give you an example. Steve Holland, who's the under-20 national team assistant manager. Steve and I go back a long way, and Steve was a academy manager at the Crew, and then followed me to Stoke after I left. He was also the under-18s coach, and we got on really well, Steve and I, over the years. And I would say to him, I'm going to play 3-5-2 on Saturday. I said, okay, right. Boom, boom, boom. So Saturday, I play 3-5-2. When I said to, I'll also say to him the same, but I'll change if I need to. And then he'll go, what are you doing now? And I'll go, I'm giving you another problem. So we would actually be coaching the game as coaches and just reflecting and using it. They were development games, but with the same emphasis. Doesn't go away from I want to beat Crew want to beat me, and so on and so forth. But the principles of the game were still the same, because we're working in development, so we're challenging these players. Are you adaptable to go and move, step in, to go to the centre back and go on to move out to the right back when the fullback's pushed on? Because if you lose it down that side, the likelihood is that they'll try and attack down that side. So my right centre back had to be comfortable moving across. As it so happened, this lad I'm talking about, transpired, a lad called Ryan Shotton. Yeah. Ryan played a lot, his first team football at Stoke City as a right back. He was a centre half. In fact, he was a striker when I first had him. And then he became a centre back. But he played a lot of games at right full back because he was used to moving over and be comfortable in those sort of situations.
Do you think there's maybe a danger that there's a part of maybe observation, especially from a technical tactical standpoint, at young, for newer coaches, it's kind of been lost in some ways, but the emphasis on it?
I think for me, I don't blame the coaches. I say blame. I don't hold them accountable to a degree. Who I hold accountable is those who are delivering to them, because they're not, at times they're not getting the right education.
My challenge and my question to that would be, do they have enough information to be able to even deliver it?
Right. Do they? Interesting question, because we touched on something earlier, which I think will answer the question. The game has gone to, in my opinion, too much about academia rather than the game.
Yeah.
And that's where I think it's been over-influenced and equally under-influenced. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Because the fact that it's over-influenced.
Over-influenced by the academia, but there's less influence from the game.
The outcome is not what is not effective as effective as it should be as a consequences of that.
So okay, so my question to that would be, for those coaches who may fall into that category or into that bracket, what will be the key considerations you'd be asking them to think about?
Go away and reflect on your sessions all the time. Don't stop reflecting. Don't stop analyzing. And then think, well, why is this happening? That's happened because this is good. Why is it happening? Even when it's good, why is it happening? And how can I make it better? Self-reflection is absolutely important. Really important. Although I'm not actually coaching physically, I watch a lot of football. I watch a lot of the European football. Yeah, I watch it. Football's on. My office is just, I'm just in there and I'm glued. I could watch 5-6 games on a Sunday, a weekend, no problem. I'll go from one to the next. Now the women's game's on, I'll watch the women's game as well, because football's football.
Yeah.
Football, and I'll watch, and I'm watching it from a coach's perspective, and I'm saying first half I'm going to be Bayern Munich. Second half I'm going to be Chelsea last night. Yeah, and midway through the game I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do this now and see what they do. And they bring in a substitution. What would I do if they bring in a sub on? It's a bit like I go back to what we spoke about the Dutch earlier in the conversation in the World Cup. They put 2 big centre forwards on. Yeah, and they changed their game style a little bit to suit the occasion, but they became adaptable. They're adaptable. Yeah, situational. Because ultimately you want an outcome. You want the positive outcome. Your back's against the wall. You're not going to lie down and go on keep beating me up. You're going to come out like a boxer. You're going to come out throwing, and the coming out throwing like a rabbit ain't going to be good, or like a wild animal ain't going to be good. But eventually, what happens? You gain control. And coaching. There's so many different fallacies to coaching. If it's applied, I think you'll get more effective coaches. And I'm not just talking about game effective coaching, because the game thing is one thing, but especially the technical side of it, development. We had a situation when I was the academy manager at Stoke and the 18th coach, where the goalkeeping coach would say, "Can I have the two kids over?" First team goalkeepers now don't do shooting drills really. They'll do 5 minutes and then they're gone. They don't want to do the shooting and diving for injuries and all that, which is understandable. Which I don't want to get sometimes, because match day they got to dive in a match day, haven't they? But anyway, it's a new phenomenon. And one goalkeeping coach, this goalkeeping coach do it, they all do it. And again, that's my point about coaching. Not authentic, trend. Monkey see, monkey do. Pardon the expression. So they'd say, keeper. So I'm in the middle of a 9v9, 8v8. I've got the goalkeepers now. So what I would do, I would set it up. You got the goal, and I'll see if I can do something where you can, and I'll hold it up. I'll set the goal up, the pitch up. Okay, so I've got a pitch, and I'm playing. You see it here? I've got a pitch. Just a scrappy drawing. And then all I'll do, within that, I'll put 2 cones down either side. See, that's small goals. Yeah. And I'll say to my strike, if you score in here we have no goalkeepers now. If you score in here, you only get 1 goal.
Yeah.
But if you score in these corners, there's 2 goals. Do I need keepers?
No, definitely not. And I do similar stuff.
Because the session is still going on when the keepers are in there anyway. But now the keepers are not there. I want them to score in the corners anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm encouraging them to score in corners.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes I'd play the 8v8, 9v or whatever it is. And I say to the GKs, go and work on your passing for 10 minutes. And I'll just do that without the keepers. And then bring them in. So my lads get used to finishing in corners. Yeah. And then my defenders now are forced to go even tighter because they've got no keepers behind them.
Yeah.
So there's, look.
Right? These are the different constraints. This is constraints-led approach before it was branded as this constraints-led approach. I think that's what I get. I think sometimes we're getting too lost in the academic side of it. I think there is a lot of influence. I think it's definitely some of it's got benefits. Definitely,
yeah,
I think it's good to understand rationale and the underpinning of why things work, maybe, and how they work. But I think it can sometimes detract from the game itself. And I just feel like we're moving to a point, or we have done in some ways, where there's a possible danger of having a load of people who are just theory.
Listen, the football's not played in a classroom. Never has done, and it never will be. The one good thing, you have to understand it and take the best part of it and utilize it properly on the grass or the training field. And that's why practice designs are so important, because practice design has to have challenges, has to have an outcome. So you set your practice up to give that. So when people talk about constraints and all that, constraints, come on, we're talking about football. So constraints in basketball, if you want to know about football, watch basketball. Because they talk about counterattacks. That's the best thing. You ever speak to Thierry Henry about football, he'll always tell you, if he was running a football club, he would always have a basketball court in there. The reason being, 5v5 counterattacks. That's why people used to play 5-a-side a lot, because it's quick. Boom, 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 boom. Transition. They use the word transition now. There's a game. Turnovers. And it becomes repetitive. So you learn to defend against counterattacks. You learn to attack against eye pressing defense quickly. 8v8, 9v9, 10v10s. Boom, 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 boom. Yeah, with intensity. So you're playing the game, but that is, as I said before, is a game-related practices. You can get everything out of that. You get your fullbacks against your wide players. You get your 1v1s. You can cone the area off 1v1s, both flanks. Centre half against strikers. Midfield players against midfield players. One midfield player can go, 2 midfield players can go. If you play with a 3 or whatever, whichever way you want to do it. But crosses are going, you must have 3 in the box. So you get 3 in the box. Where the 3 going to come from? I got number 9. I got a 9. The 7 is crossing. The 7 is crossing. Midfield player can go and Joe 11 can go. And I've got 3 in the box. Watch Man United back in Ferguson era, all that three in the box when they're scoring a goal. Not always, but in the main. That's the principles. Get three in the box. Why? You got more chance to score.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. No, it's been a real pleasure. I'm sure we could probably sit here for hours and maybe even days going on about all the different things that have evolved in the game and where coaching's going. But I want to say a massive thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions and thoughts and considerations that, you've given people to think about off the back of this conversation as well. So, massively appreciate it. Thank you again for your time, man.
You're welcome. It's been good. It's been a long time since I've sat there and talked about the game. The game's evolving. And the trends of the game and coaching, whether playing or coaching, is fascinating. It really is. There's no right way and there's no wrong way. Yeah. But it's okay. I always go and say, be authentic and do what you think is right for you and your players that you're working with. And there's your style. Not one way is the right way. One cap doesn't fit everybody. That's why you have different sizes of hats. It's all different.
You know what? And I'll just add to that, and just to really finish things off, is that there isn't a one right way to do it. And where I've kind of encouraged the coaches to kind of go towards now is the right way is the way that works for those players.
Effective.
In that moment. Right, the right way is the way that works, and if it works, that's it. No one can tell you that's not coaching.
Yeah. But the one thing I'd leave you with is that, and we were touching a moment ago, is that and you started that bit. Just because you've won the game doesn't mean you've got out of it what you want. So go into the game with some learning outcomes or objectives, learning outcomes, in particular in development. Yeah. Because then what you're doing, you're improving your blueprint as you're going along. And there's the word I don't particularly like in football. There's your philosophy evolving. It's evolving. Philosophy evolves. Yeah, no problems.
Well, there you have it, guys. Another episode of the Coaches Network podcast, where our aim is to bring the world of athlete, talent, and personal development together to just one platform. And you can help us with that mission right now by sharing this episode or any of your favorite episodes with everyone that you can think of. You can tag us in those mentions as well on Instagram at the Coaches Network or on Twitter at the Coaches Net. We look forward to hearing from you. Let us know what you thought about today's episode. And until next time, guys, take care.